format, which we've done under Senator Toomey and under Senator Crapo a number of times in the past. For those joining remotely, there are a few reminders. Once you start speaking, both for witnesses and members, there will be a slight delay before you're displayed on the screen. Don't let that throw you, just begin. To minimize background noise, please click the mute button until it is your turn to speak or ask questions. That will help us. If there's a technology issue, we'll move to the next senator. Cameron Ricker is so good at this, so he will help you fix that. But we'll move to the next senator or witness until it's resolved, just to keep things moving. Each witness will have 5 minutes to speak for your statement, of course. For all senators, the 5-minute clock still applies for your questions. You can see the 5-minute clock on the screen for most of you. At 30 seconds remaining, and Senator Crapo, Chairman Crapo set this up, I think it's a good thing to do. You'll hear a bell ring. You should each hear it. We'll all hear it to remind you your time's almost expired. Some people have trouble seeing the clock, so they will ring again when your time has expired. And to simplify the speaking order process, Senator Toomey and I have agreed to go by seniority, not time of arrival as we do in person, but go by seniority for this hearing. It'll just be simpler. So thank you for going through all that, and welcome to all of you and the hearing members and witnesses. It shouldn't be a surprise that our first hearing is about the coronavirus. It's affected every American's health and home and family and workplace. It's obviously infected the entire economy for nearly the last year. On this and on all the issues to come before this committee, we're going to get to work for all the Americans who have not had much of a voice in Washington or in our economy. Ohioans and working families all over the country know what that's like. They have too much experience watching the largest multinational corporations thrive, while too often our communities, our small businesses, our workers get left behind. Long before the Great Recession, our trade and tax policy abandoned the industrial heartland in working class towns and neighborhoods all over the country, frankly, too often with bipartisan support. Communities from the Mahoning Valley to the Mon Valley, from Newark, Ohio to Newark, New Jersey, all watched factory after factory close with no plan to rebuild our local economies. Entire neighborhoods and entire towns hollowed out. People felt like their hard work no longer paid off. For Black and brown workers, it had never really paid off like it should. They were the first to be preyed on by shady mortgage lenders, the first to lose their jobs, the first to get foreclosed on. Now they feel like they're watching history repeat itself. My colleagues on this committee have heard me say many times that this pandemic has been the great revealer. It's laid bare what so many Americans already knew, that millions of workers have little economic security. They can't get a foothold in this economy, no matter how hard they work. So many families are one emergency away from draining what little savings they have, or turning to a payday lender, or getting evicted. If the bus quits running after 10 o'clock and she can't make it to her night shift, she loses her job. If the restaurant where he works cuts back his hours, he has to choose between paying the rent or paying the electric bill. Last year, I was talking to a grocery worker in Southwest Ohio who told me, they call me essential, but I feel expendable. They don't pay me much. They don't protect me at work. It's not a coincidence that many of the workers corporations treat as expendable are Black and brown workers. So often they are women. This pandemic hasn't just exposed racial disparities and income inequality and general disparities and gender disparities, it's made them worse. Black and brown Americans are more likely to work in frontline jobs that can't be done remotely, or they're more likely to be exposed to the virus and the anxiety that they bring home with them. They're less likely to have paid leave, making them more likely to lose their job if they get sick or if their child gets sick. They have less savings to fall back on because of generations of wealth inequality. Black small businesses have closed at twice the rate of white small businesses. The system that's been making it harder for their work to pay off and putting their lives at risk for generations long before this virus appeared. And as for the toll this pandemic has taken on women, ask any mother how she's doing now. Millions of American women now have 3 jobs for the last 11 months. They're full-time caregivers. They're teaching their children. They're doing the job they had before the pandemic. And notice only one of those 3 jobs actually comes with a paycheck. For 2.3 million women, they simply can't do all 3. They've been forced out of the workforce altogether. That's 2.3 million families scraping by with less, trying to figure out how they'll pay the mortgage or pay for health insurance or pay for groceries this month. It's always the same story. When the biggest corporations and the largest banks need help, their allies in Washington spring into action. But when the rest of the country needs investment and support, they pretend we can't afford it. Today, under new leadership on this committee, we have a clear message. Those days are over. We will not settle for less. Black and brown workers don't have to settle for a system that treats them and their lives as expendable. Mothers don't have to settle for doing 3 jobs with no help. Small businesses like ours represented on this panel today don't have to settle for scraps while they watch corporate profits soar. Ohio and the rest of the country don't have to settle for a Wall Street first recovery. We're the world's richest country with the world's largest economy. We have the resources to rise to meet the challenge for everyone. That's what President Biden's doing with his rescues plan. It's what we will do in this committee starting today. Our witnesses will make clear the importance of a recovery that supports all Americans. We'll hear from the president of the nation's largest transit workers union, who's working to keep his members safe amidst great difficulty. We're here from a small business owner who's struggling to keep his doors open and his workers on the job. We'll hear from a legal services lawyer from Columbus who has spent much of his time trying to help people stay in their homes. We'll hear from the mayor of an industrial town that has suffered disinvestment for decades. It's been stereotyped by national pundits and is now facing the same challenges as cities and towns and neighborhoods in all of our states. These are voices that have been ignored or shouted down, even ridiculed by corporate elites, their newspaper of record, and too many in Washington. That ends now. We will get help to people, all people, to stay in their homes and pay their bills. We'll keep the doors open at minority-owned businesses that entrepreneurs have worked their whole lives to build. We'll keep our buses and trains running and keep those workers on the job. It's about recovery. It's about rebuilding. It's about empowering all Americans, no matter who you are, no matter where you live, no matter what kind of work you do. It's about investing in all communities. We'll show the American people, all people, that their government, for a change, their government is on their side. It's time to get to work. Senator Toomey.
Thank you, Chairman Brown. Less than a month ago, President Biden made a call for unity, and he promised a COVID strategy based on truth, not politics, based on science, not denial. That's a quote. And it's what makes it so disappointing that our Democratic colleagues in the White House are pushing this $1.9 trillion spending bill. They're using a process that is designed to not find common ground, designed to be purely partisan. It is not informed by any objective measure of needs. The only organizing principle seems to be to spend as much money as possible and willfully ignore the adverse impacts of these policies. Now, COVID has been an extraordinary crisis, no question about it. And Congress responded in an extraordinary way. When the government shut down the economy because of COVID in March and April of last year, it produced a crisis that Congress responded to with, over the course of last year, 5 overwhelmingly bipartisan bills, almost $4 trillion in relief. One of these bills was signed into law less than 2 months ago. And now, and for some time now, the economy has been in a recovery mode. In April, the unemployment rate was 14.8%. In January of this year, it's down to 6.3%, and 18 states have unemployment rates below 5%. GDP growth in the last 2 quarters has been extraordinary, and the consensus for this entire year is to have extremely strong economic growth, could be as much as 5%. Now, there's certainly serious suffering occurring in those industries, among workers in the industries that have been hard hit: hospitality, travel, entertainment, leisure. But this bill isn't targeted at them. This bill is a wasteful, not at all targeted, and largely unrelated to COVID bill. Just consider some of the items. The so-called universal stimulus checks, the vast majority of the 160 million Americans that have received checks never experienced any loss of income. And under President Biden's plan, if they follow the eligibility criteria of the first 2 rounds, then there'll be families with 6-figure incomes, no loss of income, and they'll receive another $10,000 plus in checks. Extra unemployment insurance benefits will result in about half of all beneficiaries getting paid more not to work than they get paid to work. How does that respect the dignity of work? A minimum wage increase to $15 that the CBO projects will cost 1.3 million to 3.7 million jobs and deny so many young people, especially, that first step on the economic ladder. We have a witness today, Gianni Crecchiolo, and he's going to tell us firsthand the kind of impact on his employees of the $15 minimum wage he's been subject to. State and local government, another terrible idea driven by apparently a desire to bail out fiscally irresponsible cities and states. Consider this. In the aggregate, state and local governments for 2020 took in an all-time record amount of revenue. Let me say this again. There was no huge collapse of revenue. In 2020, state and local governments set a new all-time record high for revenue. That does not count the $572 billion that we sent them anyway over the course of last year. And now we're told we need to send them another $350 billion on top of that. Transit, $30 billion. Congress already provided $39 billion for transit, of which $14 billion was appropriated just 2 months ago. We're now supposed to send yet another $30 billion. Housing, $40 billion for housing assistance. We provided $40 billion in response to COVID and $25 billion for rental assistance, again, less than 2 months ago. And that's all, of course, on top of the $800 billion the federal government has provided in stimulus checks and unemployment insurance benefits to cover expenses like rents and mortgages. So, Mr. Chairman, it's disappointing to me that the president's call for unity is starting to ring hollow. All five of the relief bills enacted to date were overwhelmingly bipartisan. There's a reason that this one is not, and it's because there's no rational economic justification for what's in it. This bill is not about COVID. It's not about an economic recovery. It's not about stimulus. It appears to be more about enacting a long-standing Democratic Party wish list. The focus of Congress should be working to return the economy to the pre-COVID strength we had, where we were at record low unemployment levels and there were more job openings than there were people looking for jobs. That's what we need to get back to. One of the things that we should be insisting on is that schools reopen. The president says he's going to be guided by science. Well, the science is in. CDC research shows it is safe to reopen schools, and it is necessary for the sake of our kids that we do so. These closures have been very harmful to student performance and well-being in a variety of ways. So, Mr. Chairman, I think the focus should be on the actions that will help this economy recover instead of using the pandemic and the past economic crisis of early last year to justify partisan policy priorities.
For your side, I will introduce the 5 witnesses and then we will begin in the order of introduction. So I will start with Mr. Costa after I introduce each of the 5 of you. Mr. Costa, your testimony will go first. Mr. John Costa is the international president of the Transit Union. He joined Local 819 in his hometown of Newark, New Jersey, as a rail maintenance worker about 40 years ago. He was local president for 3 terms, following heading the New Jersey ATU in 2010. He became international vice president and international president in 2019. Welcome, President Costa. Thank you for pushing for better wages and safer working conditions for the transit workforce. Mr. Jamil Tito Brown is the 51st mayor of the city of Youngstown, Ohio. Prior to becoming mayor, he was chief deputy treasurer overseeing day-to-day operations in the Mahoning County Treasurer's Office. He's director of the Human Relations Commission for the city of Youngstown. Last year, my entire staff, my personal office and committee staff, met with Mayor Brown, where he led a panel discussion about challenges facing Ohio cities, and we know there are many of those. Welcome, Mayor. Nice to have you. Mr. Joshi Sushima has been staff attorney at the Legal Aid Society of Columbus, Ohio, with the housing team at the Legal Aid Society since December of 2016. Columbus is the 14th largest city in the country. Thousands of its residents are struggling to pay their rent, pay their mortgage, pay their electric bill. They opened an eviction court in the Columbus Convention Center. Mr. Sushima is a strong advocate for educating tenants who have to face that court and understanding how housing relates to everything else in people's lives. Welcome, Mr. Sushima. Nice to see you. Mr. Doug Holtz-Eakin is president of the American Action Forum. He served in a variety of policy positions inside and outside of government, chief economist at the Council of Economic Advisors, director of the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office. The first time I ever interacted with him, he was director of domestic and economic policy for the McCain presidential campaign and a commissioner of the Financial Crisis and Inquiry Commission. But Dr. Holtz-Eakin, I know we don't always see issues the same way, but I thank you always for your passionate defense, as the chairman does too, and as the ranking member does too, and welcome you back to our committee. Lastly, whom I have never met, Mr. Gianni Crocchioli, is the manager of the family-owned Sal and Jerry's Baker in West Babylon, New York. Sal and Jerry's Baker is a retail wholesale bakery that supplies the public and distributors with Italian cookies, pastries, and bread. Welcome, Mr. Crocchioli, to the Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs Committee, and thank you for joining us and sharing your story, which is very important to us. So, Mr. Costa, you can begin. Thank you. You're on mute.
Okay, every time I hit it, he hits it. All right, looks good. Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity to testify here today. I'm ATU International President John Costa. Transit workers have been true heroes during this pandemic. They put their lives on the line each day to keep America moving. On behalf of the entire transit industry and our riders, thank you for providing the funding necessary for transit to survive. Without the $39 billion in emergency aid, we would have come to a grinding halt. The buses and trains have kept running, so grocery store workers keep the shelves stocked. Child care workers keep our kids safe, and nurses keep us alive. You've also saved our members' jobs, and we are sincerely grateful. Of course, the downside of staying on the job as a bus operator is that you are continuously exposed to COVID. It's no surprise that thousands of transit workers have tested positive. We drive tin cans with bad air circulation. 135 ATU members have died from this virus. TWU has lost even more. Nearly 300 families will never be the same. It didn't have to be this way. With proper precautions, transit service can be delivered safely. But the previous administration let us down. From the beginning, FDA told us that masks were not recommended. We pleaded with them to get PPE to the transit systems. They ignored us. So we went out and got gloves and masks ourselves. We also asked for help on social distancing, contact tracing, and other protective measures. But FDA watered down the CDC guidelines. So each day, more of our members and passengers died. We're still paying the price. President Biden was left with no plan to get shots into arms and no reserves. In my home state in New Jersey, transit purchased refrigerators to store the vaccines so our members can get the shots right on site. But they've been empty for more than a month. So we wait for the shots, putting our lives on the line every day. And yesterday, another New Jersey transit operator, our member, passed away due to COVID-19. In addition to driving a bus, our members are also mass police. They get attacked for enforcing rules and trying to stop the spread. We had a baseball bat beating in California. We had a 2x4 attack in Texas, a bone-breaking sucker punch in New York. It's happening everywhere. President Biden's mask mandate is a great start. We just need help enforcing it. Social distancing on a bus is very hard to do. Passengers in many locations are allowed in the front row, too close for comfort, and we are now collecting fares. A lot of our buses have shields due to COVID. Most are better than nothing, but still leave a gap exposing us to attacks. Our maintenance and cleaning members do amazing jobs wiping down and cleaning the surfaces in our buses. While ridership is way down, buses are still jammed in cities where people don't have a choice. Not just places like Newark, where I'm from. It's the Midwest, the South. People have to go to work. They still have to come to work and they don't have a car. Essential workers like healthcare workers, service jobs workers, grocery store workers, and people who clean building, mostly of color, blacks lag behind whites in receiving the vaccine. And it's not just because many are suspicious of the government. Access is a key factor, and transit plays a huge role. So transit systems across the country are now giving free rides to vaccination sites, and our members are proud to play a part of this effort. But we can't do this without funding. That's where you come in. Local funding and fare box revenue are way down. We're going to need federal operations to assist for a long time. ATU joins APTA, calling for an additional $39.3 billion in emergency funding. We appreciate the $30 billion in the new bill and hope it gets spread around the whole country. We need to continue to provide essential service in places like Pittsburgh, Providence, Charlestown, Boston, Baltimore, Nashville, Atlanta, and of course, Youngstown. And I want to give a shout out to ATU Local 272 and everywhere in between. Without us, transit-dependent people will suffer and more will die due to this pandemic. We can't leave anyone stranded. Also, Congress should do the right thing and provide hazard pay for all frontline workers who have put their lives on the line during this pandemic. People call us heroes, but at the table we're zeros. We can't change what has happened in the past. Our members and our passengers we've lost are not coming back, but we continue to support for transit, a strong federal role in enforcing and the safety measures, and a seat at the table for workers to express their COVID concerns. We can work our way through these challenges and safely deliver the transit services that transit needs. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Costa. Mayor Brown, welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Chairman Brown and Ranking Member Toomey, for inviting me to testify before the Senate Committee on Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs. I'm Jamel Tito Brown, the mayor of the city of Youngstown. We're a small city in the Midwest of a population of about 67,000. This is the 44 years since the closure of steel mills in the city. As a legacy city, we have faced a history of corrupt corporate politicians and governmental mistrust among our community. My administration has had to overcome obstacles, inadequate educational resources, lack of livable wage jobs, and have always had historical problems in our community. The further hindrance in the efforts for recovery is the decline of a housing stock and transportation for those who need access to employment. The current global pandemic has hit this community harder than ever. COVID-19 has been a great revealer of the health, social, economic, racial disparities of our community. Small to medium-sized business are also feeling the impact of the pandemic, especially minority-owned business, many of whom did not have an established relationship with a banking institution prior to the pandemic. The needs of the city of Youngstown are no different from other communities across the nation. When a city is barely rebounding from 50 years of economic decline because of outside forces beyond our control, those rebounds have been further eviscerated by COVID-19. Whatever federal assistance is provided must be a long-term coordinated strategy to get the resources we need to address the public health impact of COVID-19 and ensure that housing, transportation, and small business efforts are included in federal rescue plan. If any component is ignored, the entire community structure will likely fail. Our Ohio cities particularly have been hard hit by the economic downturn of this pandemic. This is because cities in Ohio rely on municipal income tax as a primary source of revenue. The tax source is much more susceptible to the economic condition as opposed to more stable sales or property tax revenue streams. Youngstown has seen its impact firsthand. We are the county seat of our county, Mahoney County. We have one of the highest unemployment rates in the state, ranking 75th out of 88 in the counties. When unemployment is up, tax revenue is down. These economic challenges have ripple effects all across our regional economy, from housing to public transit in the economy activity that sustains our small business. In order to truly recover from a pandemic, relief has to happen in our neighborhoods and our community where they only not survive, they must thrive. Cities do not have an opportunity to flounder for another 50 years. A federal rescue plan must include assistance to help build back better legacy cities like Youngstown, Ohio. It should include, and as outlined by President Biden, assistance for production and distribution of COVID-19 vaccinations, rental assistance for families, transit assistance to keep buses running so essential workers can continue to work, direct revenue replacement for cities, and small business support for hardworking business owners can keep their workforce. The relief should be flexible, free of bureaucratic red tape, so that the pace of recovery is not stymied by federal mandates. Transparency of local government spending should be the guiding mandate to reinforce accountability and build trust with communities. Small businesses need assistance. Small cities need assistance quickly. Small cities need assistance desperately. Local municipalities need direct revenue replacement like the $350 billion proposed by President Biden. The impact of COVID-19 is still affecting many of the citizens I represent. Families are still hurting. We need immediate relief during these difficult times. I urge you to think of this part as a long-term, sustainable recovery plan to build back and create thriving communities. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Tsushima, please proceed. Thank you.
All right. Chairman Brown, Ranking Member Toomey, and distinguished members of this committee, thank you for inviting me today to speak. My name is Joshi Tsushima, and I am a staff attorney at the Legal Aid Society of Columbus, a Ohio nonprofit that provides legal assistance to low-income clients. I run our eviction prevention clinic, the Tenant Advocacy Project, where my team and I represent tenants in eviction trials at Franklin County Municipal Court. Every morning, Monday through Friday, we watch tenants and landlords check into court. About 90 to 100 eviction trials are scheduled per day, all for 9 a.m. before one magistrate. Our court uses a cattle call system where tenants, families, landlords, and attorneys wait in an atrium for cases to be called, one at a time, for trials that typically last only a few minutes. My team tries to help as many families as we can and scramble for solutions that will keep them housed, while partner agencies try to connect them with rental assistance. But this is not always enough, and many tenants still end up being evicted. Even before the pandemic, over 54,000 low and moderate income households in Central Ohio spent more than half of their income towards housing. When these renters lost their jobs or their hours were cut due to the pandemic, they were forced to rely on erratic spurts of stimulus checks, unemployment, and rental assistance, with little certainty about how much would come or when it would arrive. Not everyone is guaranteed assistance because there just isn't enough to go around. Even when assistance is available, many low-income people are just paying off old debts, leaving nothing to pay next month's rent. They're not hanging by a thread. They're constantly waiting for one to be thrown down to save them. Being ill from COVID only makes it worse. Tenants cannot pay rent when they catch COVID and miss work. Tenants cannot even attend court when COVID puts them on a ventilator. We recently asked a landlord's attorney to reschedule a case until our hospitalized tenant was well enough to attend. The attorney refused and replied that, although unfortunate, they would still proceed with evicting the tenant because that is the right of the property owner, and that is how it always has been. Eviction moratoriums are effective in preventing these scenarios and the spread of COVID, but only if they are enforced. The moratoriums under the CARES Act and CDC have provided tremendous relief to many tenants. However, both moratoriums have had loopholes that have allowed devastating levels of evictions. The CARES Act moratorium had little oversight and delegated enforcement to the self-regulation of landlords. Current guidance for the CDC moratorium allows landlords to continue filing evictions. If a tenant asks our court for protection under the CDC moratorium, the tenant must pass a truthfulness hearing to prove that they are truly poor enough to qualify. One of our clients lost his job to the pandemic and was supporting himself and his two kids on $98 weekly unemployment checks. His landlord filed an eviction against him for failing to pay rent. At trial, the landlord's attorney grilled him on why he couldn't spend any of his unemployment towards rent. Our client responded, "It all went to food and utilities." The attorney then argued to the court that our client should have paid some of the unemployment towards rent. The court declined this argument and imposed the moratorium. However, the landlord then filed a new eviction against our client, claiming that he was now a holdover tenant. This client was one of the lucky ones. Over 4,000 evictions were filed in our court between September and December of 2020. Less than 20 of them were actually halted by the moratorium. Evictions in COVID are also hitting our Black communities the hardest. About 60% of our clients at eviction court are Black, while Black residents make up only 24% of Columbus's population. You're also twice as likely to die from COVID if you are Black than if you are white. None of my clients chose their race, or to be poor, or to die more easily from COVID. The rest of us, however, have a choice in either taking action or being bystanders to the consequences of this pandemic. We need more aggressive interventions, including reliable rental assistance and effective eviction moratoriums. An estimated 272 to 552,000 Ohio families are at risk of an eviction without such intervention, while 7 to 14 million households nationwide face the same peril. These numbers do not even account for the millions of homeowners facing similar threats through foreclosures. Widespread displacement of these families will devastate our nation for years to come. We must do more to ensure that everyone has a home, not just because it is right, but because it is necessary. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Tsushima. Dr. Holtz, proceed. Thank you.
Chairman Brown, Ranking Member Toomey, and members of the committee, thank you for the privilege of being here today. To date, the response of Congress to the COVID-19 recession has been remarkable. It's been appropriately timed, appropriately scaled, and had the appropriate targeting and composition. Unfortunately, the American Rescue Plan does not meet any of those criteria, at least not to my eye. It's not appropriately timed. This isn't March of 2020 when the economy was falling at an annual rate of over 30%. Since then, recovery has begun. We've had strong economic growth in the third and fourth quarters of 2020. The CBO projects that 2021, the economy will grow at 4.6%, and current estimates are above that. The Federal Reserve Bank of New York has a nowcast estimate for the first quarter of this year at 6.7%. The Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta has its GDP now estimate of 9.5%. So this is not an economy that's in recession and needs stimulus. It's an economy that is growing rapidly and just received nearly $1 trillion of federal support in December of last year. So the timing seems off. It's not an appropriate scale. 1.9 trillion is just way too large, even given the advocates of the need for stimulus. The problem, according to the Congressional Budget Office, is that the economy is roughly $450 billion in 2012 dollars, but roughly $450 billion below its potential because we have millions of people out of work. And this is a 1.9 trillion response to that problem. It is far too large. The theory of stimulus is there will be multiplier effects. $1 of federal spending will deliver more than $1 of additional economic activity and income. As I showed in my written testimony, if you assume the multiplier is well less than one, half, that the economy will overheat by the end of this year if we put 1.9 trillion in stimulus in it. So the scale is all wrong, and that's true of some of the elements of the plan as well. The ranking member noted the housing assistance in this bill. Combining the housing assistance from December with an additional proposed in this bill would give you something that's roughly double the problem as I estimated. And that ignores any income support those same individuals may have gotten through the unemployment insurance and the economic support payments, the checks that the households have received. So the scale seems wrong for the problem that we have. And the composition and the targeting is at odds with the basic idea. Certainly, I don't think it should be thought of as stimulus. The real problem is the recession came from the disease, and it's the coronavirus that is the problem. What we saw in March and April of 2020 is people stopped spending on services. They did not go out and engage in any service that would involve personal contact, and thus the risk of infection and transmission. In particular, the affluent households in America dropped their spending dramatically. Though that spending has not returned, and there is nothing in this bill that would restore the spending of those affluent households. There isn't a UI provision, there isn't a check, there isn't any of those elements that add up to 1.9 trillion that will solve that problem. That problem gets solved only by addressing the virus itself. We should support every effort on vaccination, on testing, on contact tracing, and on fighting the coronavirus, and that in the end will restore the economy. And these will not. That spending still remains missing in action. There are other compositional issues. This is not targeted on those who have been suffered any financial distress. It's a broad-based program. The composition of some of the elements, I think, are at odds with good economics. Raising the federal bonus on unemployment insurance to $400 a week is simply too large, and extending it through the end of the summer, when we expect the labor market to have been restored to functioning because of the vaccination efforts, really will interfere with recovery and not support it. There's nothing about raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour in the middle of this that will enhance recovery. It will damage the small businesses, a quarter of which have already shut their doors in America. And there are things in here that have nothing to do with COVID-19, with recovery from recession. It contains a bailout of the multi-employer pension plan that is a disappointment given the bipartisan efforts to do that in a sensible fashion. It contains expansions of the EITC and child credits, for example, that look like permanent policy and might make sense, but have nothing to do with COVID-19. So I find this a disappointing effort. The Congress has done so well in responding to COVID-19 thus far, and I would encourage the committee to look in another direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Holtzik, and Mr. Cracchiolo, welcome to our committee. Thank you.
Chairman Brown, Ranking Member Toomey, and distinguished members of the Senate Banking Committee, thank you for your invitation to testify today. I am Gianni Cracchiolo. My family owns Salinger's Bakery in New York. Salinger's Bakery is a retail and wholesale bakery that supplies the public with Italian baked goods. My father and his cousin, immigrants from Italy, founded Salinger's Bakery in 1983 in Bensonhurst, Brooklyn. Our bakery was a staple in our community for nearly 40 years until we were unfortunately forced to close our doors of August of 2020. This bakery was our family's legacy, one filled with entrepreneurial spirit and rich with tradition, culture, and love. It was the quintessential American dream for immigrants who came to this country to provide for a better life for their families. Minimum wage hikes and other state and federal regulations acted as a silent killer that slowly chipped away at revenue that caused our bakery to perish. COVID-19 and the ensuing lockdowns were not the main cause of our closure, but were the straw that broke the camel's back. Coronavirus should not be used as a scapegoat by policymakers to further ignore the fact that small businesses are vanishing in this country due to government regulations, making it difficult to succeed. The decline in growth and long-term viability of our bakery became evident during the first few years of minimum wage increases in New York. At our retail bakery, we had 3 tiers of wages. First tier was our night bakers, who got paid a premium for shift differential. The second tier were day shift bakers, and the third tier were general laborers. General laborers are product packers, retail counter service, and maintenance workers. These were individuals who typically consist of working students, entry-level employees, and hourly staff. These individuals started at minimum wage as they began to learn the trade and advance in their roles. As Tier 3 minimum wage employees' pay increased $1 per fiscal year, wages began creeping up to the Tier 2 wages. And this is where the problem started. You cannot justify the fact that working high school students or entry-level employees with no prior experience should be making the same wages as experienced staff. It is neither fair nor ethical. As years passed, my Tier 2 workers began to take notice of the minimum wage increases and demanded more pay to compensate for their experience and skill. It was soon a domino effect when the first tier employees wanted raises. We found ourselves with our backs against the wall in a situation where all salaries needed to increase. This crippled us. To put it into perspective, each year that the minimum wage increased $1, payroll for the year went up $40,000. Multiply that by the number of years it's gone up, we're now at $120,000 total. This chokehold was something that a small bakery could no longer withstand. I needed to make up for these increases, and the only way to do so was to pass it on to our consumers. How much is someone willing to pay for a loaf of bread or a pound of cookies? At some point, people who were used to paying a certain price for a loaf of bread were going to start to complain. And that's exactly what they did. Customers began to shop for their baked goods at supermarkets and large box stores. These stores offered lower quality versions of our products at a price point that customers were comfortable with. The corner bakery where they used to get their daily bread was now a luxury item, only to be brought on special occasions and holidays. The big businesses benefited greatly from the minimum wage increases and continued to see their valuations explode. They garnered more customers, our customers, and replaced half of their minimum wage staff with electronic kiosks and part-time help. It was a win-win situation for big business. To add insult to injury, in 2020, the CARES Act provided additional unemployment incentives to our employees, exceeding their pay. We essentially lost our entire staff from March to July because employees were making more money staying at home claiming unemployment to meet work. Even though we received nominal assistance from the Paycheck Protection Program, we called our employees to return to work, yet they did not. The economic injury disaster loan assistance we received did not even cover 1 month's expenses. It became impossible to retain my workforce, maintain productivity, and turn a profit. I had no choice but to do this. The federal government provided more help for people to stay home than have businesses stay open. Small businesses created 80% of the jobs in this country. They're the backbone of America. If small businesses continue to close their doors, this country will be harmed economically. Thank you for the opportunity to share our experience, and I look forward to any questions.
Mr. Crocchiolo, I thank you for your testimony. Let me start the questioning with Mr. Costa. I want to first express my condolences to the loved ones of the hundreds of transit workers across this country. I know 135 of your members have passed away from COVID, and I know hundreds of other transit workers and other unions, TWU and others. So we send our condolences for the ultimate sacrifice they made. Talk, if you would, about transit systems and the dire need they face. In my state, the governor's budget cuts transit dollars from 70 million down to 7 million. These cuts clearly would have an impact on not just on the drivers, but on the public that needs transit to get to work. Explain why further resources are so essential to the transit system writ large around the country, if you would, Mr. Costa.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Look, with the restaurants closed down, the bars closed down, the revenue was not there. All right, the tax revenue was hurting the states and the cities. And the last bailout gave us the opportunity to keep the jobs, keep the buses on the road. And if we don't have another bailout, it's just going to go back to the way it was. Right now, many of our authorities are waiting for this funding. They need this funding. They're holding back on their budgets to see what's coming out. If they don't get, and the reason I'm saying waiting is because if they don't get it, what they're waiting on is layoffs, cuts in service, which will just hurt the economy, hurt the people that rely on transit, like we spoke before. And so the need is there for more funding for transit, and it's needed badly and quickly. My own state of New Jersey, they don't know whether they're going to lay off. Many other agencies are the same way. So also to keep the PPE and the buses safe. I mean, they need that money for that, the protection, the masks, the supplies are needed. It's funny, I listened to this, and when we were in war, nobody's debating on funding. Trillions are spent. But when it comes to war on our own turf here with this virus, we have this debate. Americans need this. My family, they have small business too, and everybody's been hurting. And it's up to government to help us here and keep our members safe and have no more of them dying. And also those vaccines are much needed, especially to my members every day out there moving the front lines.
Thank you, Mr. Costa. Mayor Brown, how's the pandemic revealed disparities in minority-owned businesses in Youngstown?
It has been a great revealer. it's really exposed that some of those underlying health issues that we've talked about, but it really put a focus on those with underlying health issues in the minority community. They're dying at a greater rapid pace because of these underlying health issues. But it also is the issue of having access to healthcare, appropriate and better healthcare than in their community, or the lack of good healthcare in the community has been the issue for us. So the health issue has been a major issue to deal with in our community.
Thanks. Mr. Shishima, on the last minute and a half or so, I'm sorry to squeeze your time. I'm guessing that most members of this committee, or at least most members of the Senate, don't know intimately people, maybe a couple of people, but generally don't know people who have been evicted. And describe what happens to your client's life when first the threat of eviction and then actually eviction. What happens to a family?
Yes, Senator. It makes it very difficult for families to just be able to operate with any normal expectation. Kids can't do their schooling because they're bouncing around between places if they end up moving out. You can't even cook a hot meal anymore if you get evicted. It creates so much chaos for families when they're being threatened to be kicked out or if they are actually evicted. And these sort of consequences are things that take years to actually recover on. I mean, if a kid, children, when they actually have to, say, leave school, it often puts them behind, and that has long-term consequences in the future for their ability to become employed or go to college. And there's a lot of statistical evidence tying that to negative health outcomes, increased rates of crime, and it's such a systemic impact just from
Go ahead, finish. I'm sorry. Finish your sentence.
Oh, I did.
I'm sorry. Okay, thank you. Senator Toomey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I cannot see the clock. So maybe if we could make whatever adjustment, I think we've tried to do that in the past. So that would be helpful if it's possible. Let me pose my first question to Dr. Holtz-Eakin. The fact is, in 2020, in the aggregate, income did not collapse. Employee compensation was up 2%, wages and salaries up 2.2%. This is during the peak of the pandemic. Savings rate reached an all-time record high, and transfer payments were an all-time record high. So, Dr. Holtz-Eakin, let me just ask you this directly. Is it your view that the federal government's policies more than replaced the total lost income of American workers last year?
Thank you. I was muted by the host, sorry. Yes, we saw aggregate income rise over 2020, and this is not an income-related recession. It's the virus itself, which has impeded economic activity.
Right. So if we do another round of stimulus checks, first, do you agree with my assessment that a majority of those checks end up going to people who never had any lost income, no interruption of income? And secondly, is it your view that that is not constructive for the economy, for the government to be just arbitrarily sending money to people who've never had any lost income?
Yeah, there's no targeting on lost income in this proposal, and the vast majority will go to people who have never had a day of interruption and are actually relatively affluent. And so that doesn't make a lot of sense in these circumstances. And there is a risk. I think for me, the big risk is that we will see that money flow into first savings accounts, and then, well, maybe I can get a little more yield if I go into the stock market, and maybe I can do a little bit on my Robinhood app with some puts and calls, and 21st century recessions have been preceded by financial volatility, and I worry about the implications of hundreds of billions of dollars sloshing around financial markets for no good reason.
Yeah, we're seeing some very strange in various asset prices. Let me ask about on the housing side, the eviction moratorium and rental assistance. And I like to stress, we've already allocated $1 trillion in direct assistance to individuals. And that's a big part of why in the aggregate household income is so high. But let me ask you this. If landlords come to the conclusion that they will at least periodically be in a position where they have no enforcement mechanism on collecting rent, what's the likely effect on the supply of housing and the cost of housing in response to that reality?
Being a landlord will be a bad business to be in, and they will exit, and we will have less in the way of housing supply, and it'll be much more expensive. And in urban areas, historically, that's going in the wrong direction, where affordable housing has been at a premium.
So the short version is less supply and higher costs
Yes.
for low income housing.
Yes.
Let me ask a question for Mr. Cracchiolo. I want to be clear about something. When the unemployment benefits were increased to the point where most workers got paid more not to work than they got to work, did that create a difficulty for you in retaining your workforce?
Absolutely. And thank you for your question. It was difficult because when employees are getting paid more to stay home, why come back to work? And with the policy our governor put in place, you had to accept these employees when they came back to work. They were guaranteed their positions. It's difficult when you have to try to prove if an employee has contracted the virus or not. I was given no evidence, and when I contacted the Department of Labor, as they contacted me telling me which employees were collecting assistance, even after they had told me, I've been in contact with someone, well, they automatically get 2 weeks at home, and then in those 2 weeks, they apply for the assistance, and they stayed home until July.
And then we're about to run out of time, so just very quickly, I just want to be clear. The minimum wage that you're subject to, and if that were to be rolled out nationally, is it your view that that does not affect equally small and large businesses, but rather puts the small businesses at a competitive disadvantage?
Absolutely. So small businesses can't do the things that big businesses are able to do to compensate for those wage increases. One of those things is big businesses can put kiosks out, self-service stations, and customers can pick up and pay, and not even be in contact with any employee at all at those big box stores. Bakeries, small businesses can't do that, especially food service businesses. I find that that's going to be a very large gap in the future between small businesses and big business is going to benefit.
Thank you. I think I'm out of time, so thank you very much.
Thank you. Senator Reed of Rhode Island.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank the panelist. Mr. Tsushima, thanks for your good work helping people. And I think we've all concluded that one of the best forms of PPE is safe, affordable housing. We've looked in Rhode Island and we've discovered that among the homeless population, in dollars and cents, their annual Medicaid cost is about $14,000 compared to the average cost is about $8,200. So if you're on the street, you're costing everyone more money, as well as exposing yourself to the COVID virus. Can you just tell me, because you're so close, what are the real costs to families and communities if we don't do more to help them? I know there's discussion about income growth, et cetera, but that's not even across the population. Low-income people aren't seeing some of the same benefits that higher income are in terms of income growth. But just from your perspective, what's the impact if we don't act?
Thank you, Senator Reed, for that question. The biggest consequences that we see is just instability with families and instability with communities. If you have a community that's suffering high rates of eviction and high rates of displacement, you see a lot of displacement that disrupts the community's ability to actually network and have members contribute to growing the community, looking at the problems that they have and addressing them. If you're evicted, you don't even have the chance to be a neighbor with somebody. And those are things that are absolutely crucial with people organizing around the challenges that they're dealing with as a community. And what we see here in Columbus is a lot of the evictions are very concentrated in specific zip codes, and they tend to be Black neighborhoods as well. And it affects so many different aspects of our society that it's very difficult to even figure out where to start. One statistics that I saw recently was that Ohio experienced an increase of it was about 16% in child homelessness between 2015 and 2018, and those homeless children end up experiencing a lot of problems that are by no means their own fault. And it's something they're going to have to live with for the rest of their lives. It means they're not getting the education they need. They're not getting the shelter they need. They're not getting the health care they need. And these are all things that create new barriers for them that they have to figure out how to overcome on their own in order to even have a fair chance at just being a resident of Columbus. These are things that we really shouldn't expect, especially kids, that we shouldn't be expecting people to have to figure out on their own. I think, with Columbus being one of the fastest growing communities in the nation, we certainly should have the resources to be able to address these problems. But I think oftentimes we have this mindset that everyone's individually responsible for figuring out how to lift themselves up by their own bootstraps, but a lot of these impoverished communities don't even have any bootstraps laying around. So it's one small example of different problems that these families and communities are dealing with. I mean, I could go into, how this affects employment when when tenants don't even have stable housing to return to rest after they've worked, or once they get evicted, they end up having to drive further away because they moved in with a family member across town. There's just so many different things that.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Just a quick word. I want to thank John Costa and his colleagues and the ATU for the great work you've done, and particularly up here in Rhode Island, Local 618 and Local 1363, and Nick DiCristofaro and Gil and Don are terrific leaders. And one issue we're pushing, I'll just make a comment, won't ask the question, is Senator Collins and I introduced the Coronavirus Economic Relief for Transportation Services to help the private bus industry and school buses, which are critical parts of our economy. We help the airlines. We hope we can help these transportation networks too. But I just want to thank you and your colleagues for your great work. So thanks, John. And thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Reed. I see the names on the screen in seniority order, Senators Crapo and Rounds and Tillis. Are they actually here if they turn their cameras on? If not, Senator Daines of Montana is next. Senator Daines, welcome.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want to thank you for hosting this very important hearing today. These last 12 months have been really tough, certainly for Montanans and for Americans across the country. Thankfully, however, I do think we're finally turning the corner. We see that through economic data. We see that through the COVID data. And this is in no small part due to the five bipartisan bills that Congress has passed this last year to help our country recover. We've passed these 5 bipartisan relief bills, and it's just frustrating to see my colleagues on this side of the aisle trying to push forward a partisan $2 trillion bill instead of continuing to work across the aisle on a relief package, which we've done successfully over the course of last year 5 times, and target a package that really helps the folks that need it the most. And it's just been less than 2 months ago, we passed a nearly $1 trillion relief bill, of which only about 50% has been spent so far. 50%. Right now, we should be focusing our efforts tracking where that money is going, where more money might be needed, and also where it isn't needed. Any future relief must be targeted to those that truly need it the most. One part of the package that certainly isn't needed is a proposal for $350 billion for state and local aid. I hope we haven't become desensitized to the size of these numbers. Think about our overall discretionary budget for the federal government. The entire budget is $1.4 trillion. So this kind of shows the magnitude of what we're talking about here. And in fact, in 2020, we enacted approximately $360 billion in aid to state and local governments. I support those packages that included that aid. However, when the state and local aid was passed, there were a lot of unknowns. The pandemic, of course, had just started. Now it's been about a year, and we do know that in 21 states, as the ranking member mentioned earlier, 21 states actually had revenue growth compared to 2019. In fact, California specifically is looking at a $25 billion surplus. So what we do know now is that $350 billion more for state and local aid is not needed to help combat the pandemic. It's not needed to make up for lost revenue because of the virus. Revenues are up. What this new pot of hundreds of billions of dollars is actually doing is going to help states that prior to the pandemic, like New York and Illinois, had fundamental fiscal problems, of course, pre-pandemic. And I don't believe Montanans should be footing the bill, Montana taxpayers, to help states get out of long-term financial problems. First question for Dr. Holtz-Eakin, is there any way to justify sending an additional $350 billion to state and local governments?
I don't think so. I would commend you the work of Louise Shiner at the Brookings Institution, who has done a very detailed state-by-state analysis of the property taxes, income taxes, corporation income taxes, sales taxes, and then other fees, and doesn't come close to that number, and moreover shows that the differences are very stark across states. And so if there's need for some state assistance, it should, like everything in this, be more targeted on places that genuinely have had a problem.
So I think something we all agree with is that we've got to ensure there's enough money for vaccines and vaccine distribution. You know, I worked for Procter & Gamble prior to coming to Congress, used to work on FDA regulated products, was part of helping get that $10 billion passed back in March to allow parallel paths of FDA clinical trials with pushing the button on supply chain and manufacturing. So it's shaved about 6 to 12 months off the timeline to get these vaccines available. And thankfully, we're now starting to see broader distribution. So we've made great progress prioritizing vaccines, got a lot more work to do, but it's very concerning to me that with this $2 trillion package, only about 1% of this package goes towards COVID-19 vaccines. And only about 5% is truly focused on the public health needs around the pandemic. And that's where, you know, if we're going to stop the pandemic, it's going to be through the vaccines. We should be doubling down on those efforts. Any additional relief package must be targeted, focused on ending the pandemic, which we will do with vaccines, not on extraneous policies that have nothing to do with the pandemic. Dr. Holtz-Eakin, don't you think we should be prioritizing aid for vaccines and actual public health needs or these extraneous policies that have nothing to do with the pandemic?
The public health mission is the top economic policy. There's no question that should be a priority. And the second priority should be relief, targeted relief to those who've suffered great financial distress.
One question for Mr. Krakalow. In your testimony, you state that small businesses create about 80% of the jobs in this country. And that's why I was grateful when we did the tax reform back in 2017. We focused on pass-through, these smaller businesses. They are the backbone of America. You stated if small businesses continue to close their doors, we will be harmed economically, and these have permanent long-term consequences. I think pretty much everyone in this committee would agree with that statement. You discussed in your testimony how paying employees more on unemployment than they make in their jobs is harmful for small businesses. If everyone wants a vaccine, we can get a vaccine by this summer or even this year, but we're providing an extra $400 a week of federal unemployment insurance through September, which oftentimes add up to more workers not being able to get to work. How difficult do you think it will be to hire workers in that situation?
I find that once, thank you for your question, Senator, but I find that once employees have access to the vaccine, I don't believe it would be as difficult to hire or bring employees back into the workforce. Just to bring it back a little bit to what you mentioned, one of the things I agree with you most is tracking where the money's going. if we're able to track, as you said, where all this money is being spent and which companies are getting it, employees can benefit greatly because they will have access to that.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm out of time here. I appreciate it. Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Daines. Senator Warren, I believe, is here. If you can turn her camera on. If not, I believe Senator Ossoff is here. Senator Ossoff from Georgia in your first hearing. Welcome.
Thank you.
Proceed, please.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you to our witnesses for your testimony today. I have to confess to being surprised to hearing some of the protest about this direct relief for the people. I think there's a reason that 80% of the American public supports this COVID relief legislation. And to address some statements made by a colleague earlier, working families in this country are not playing the stock market with this money. Working families in Georgia and across the country have had to bear extraordinary childcare costs, have faced significant loss of employment, medical bills, already were in a precarious financial situation to begin with in many cases. And this is a bipartisan relief effort in that it has the overwhelming support of a vast majority of the American people. And I hope that colleagues on both sides of the aisle can come together and instead of becoming bogged down in factional disputes, swiftly and in a united way, move this legislation, this COVID relief legislation through the Senate. I want to address a question to you, Mayor Brown, and ask you, and then I'd like as well for Mr. Tsushima to address this as well. What are the forms of exploitation and abuse that those constituents you serve, in your case, Mayor, and Mr. Tsushima, the legal aid clients that you serve, are facing during this crisis?
Senator, thank you so much for the question. I think I'll start in the housing area. And I spoke earlier about the city of Youngstown and facing a recovering economy. We have what we consider predatory lenders from foreign investors that would invest in places like Youngstown, Ohio, where they're taking property sight unseen, but they're raising those dollars and on the backs of the poor people that are paying 2 to 3 times as much in rent monthly than an average individual should have to do that. What we're finding also that they're having them enter into land contracts, and the contracts are not even binding, or there's some stipulations if you miss a few payments that we've had to have several of our local advocate groups actually take them to court to fight for that. So the predatory lending about the rent rate, and then we have the issue of where they're giving them a land contract. And the one thing many of the people I represent here in the city of Youngstown want, they want to be homeowners. And when that contract is dangled in front of them, and then it's actually a false pretense, it causes some predatory lending practice here in the community where I represent.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Tsushima?
Senator Ossoff, thank you for your question. I would fully agree with Mayor Brown's response, especially in the housing area. We see quite a bit of predatory housing in Columbus, and this has been a practice even before the pandemic. It's just something that has become a much more intense practice. And a lot of that is just due to tenants and homeowners are scrambling to find funds where they can. For homeowners, a lot of homeowners who cannot pay their mortgage, cannot pay their taxes, they're looking for quick sources of income to pay things off. And sometimes they just don't know what the consequence of not paying their mortgage or taxes are. So what ends up happening is they get approached by somebody who recognizes that they're desperate, and they'll try to maybe buy their property for real cheap, but by making these sort of threats that give the homeowner an expectation that if they don't get the mortgage or taxes paid immediately, then there's going to be maybe criminal consequences or some other type of civil legal consequences that is going to put them in the hole even further. So they end up becoming so desperate, they just end up paying or they end up just selling their homes to get out of this hole. And for renters, it's a similar scenario. They're desperate to pay rent, so they're much more likely to get short-term high-interest loans. They're more likely to start cutting back on essentials like food, medicine, utilities. It just creates very risky behaviors that open a lot of these people up to predatory behaviors that take advantage of their desperation.
Thank you, Mr. Tsushima. And Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Senator Kennedy of Tennessee for your first hearing on the Banking Housing Committee. Welcome. You're on mute.
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ranking Member Toomey. I appreciate your holding this hearing today to make certain that the funds that we allocate to put this pandemic behind us are targeted to those who most need it. I also want to applaud my colleague from Georgia for calling on a bipartisan approach to do this. The Congress has proven its ability to approach this pandemic on a bipartisan basis on a number of occasions before, and I think we've done a very good job. I'd like to share one example, if I might. In December of 2020, the Senate passed an additional $900 billion in COVID relief on a vote of 92 to 6. One of the things that this package did was to set up the Emergency Capital Investment Program. And under this program, Treasury will provide up to $9 billion in leverageable Tier 1 capital directly to community development financial institutions and to minority depository institutions so that they can provide loans, grants, and forbearance for small businesses, for minority-owned businesses, and for consumers. This program was specifically targeted to those that may be disproportionately affected by the pandemic, especially those low-income and underserved communities. However, as of this hearing, Treasury has not even had a chance to put this capital to work. This could make a significant difference. I raise this example because I believe we've got to continue to work to ensure that the trillions of dollars that Congress has approved on a bipartisan basis are being spent appropriately, expeditiously, and with the intended effect to help the American people. And we must ensure that any additional taxpayer funds are not duplicative of existing unused funds and that they're targeted to programs that are necessary to end the pandemic and to get our economy going again. With that, I'd like to direct my first question to Dr. Holtz-Eakin. Dr. Holtz-Eakin, thank you for your time, for being here. What I'd like to do is talk with you about the longer-term risks to our economy, including our financial stability, that come with untargeted oversized stimulus of this nature. I'd appreciate your comments on that.
It is a concern to me. The calculations in the testimony suggest that with even very small multipliers, 1.5, the economy reaches potential in the fourth quarter of this year, and after that, it's above potential. And I'm not deeply concerned about goods price inflation at the moment. We've had very low inflation for a decade. Even this would not turn that around overnight. But I am worried about asset price inflation, that we've seen the saving rate jump dramatically in the aftermath of packages of this size, the CARES Act in particular. Where those funds go in financial markets, I think, becomes a concern if we repeat the exercise that close to full employment. So I think the biggest risk of doing too much is, in fact, a risk to financial stability.
Thank you. I'd like to direct my next question to Mr. Costa. And again, Mr. Costa, my condolences to your members who have suffered and lost their lives in this. I appreciate their frontline service. I wanted to ask you about specifically a letter that you drafted February 1st that came from your organization and others to Leader Schumer and McConnell, to Speaker Pelosi, and to Leader McCarthy. You noted that public transit agencies face a projected funding shortfall of $39.3 billion through 2023. How much of that shortfall in dollar terms is attributable to the pandemic versus pre-existing shortfalls?
Good question, Senator. Most of it's the pandemic. Ridership was down. If it wasn't for the bailout and putting bus service back on to keep the social distancing, the original idea is that the authorities were doing, they were having massive layoffs. They were going to cut service. They were going to cut many workers' jobs, thousands. And the first bailout had them, first of all, stop the layoffs, and secondly, keep the buses, to keep the riders safe and our drivers safe, because the service was cut. So to answer your question, the pandemic, yes, was the biggest problem we had with revenue.
Could you explain then how the 39 billion that was already appropriated, actually 14 billion of that just in December, how has that impacted this shortfall?
Well, that money was spent around. It was to keep the jobs there, to keep the service running, and also PPE, the equipment sanitized, new equipment parts brought in, filterized system, shields were brought in, millions and millions of masks were brought in, gloves, sanitizer, all that was money that was needed to keep us safe.
So my time is up. Thank you.
Senator Warren, Massachusetts, welcome.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. It feels so good to be able to call you that. I wanted to talk today about essential workers. Essential workers are just that, essential. They are the people who are on the front lines. They're still showing up for work, even as the death toll in the United States approaches 500,000 people. These are the people who are keeping our economy, our healthcare system, our education system going. Without them, it would all grind to a halt. But this morning, millions of those essential workers woke up worried about contracting COVID-19 on the job. For nearly a year, the federal government has treated these workers as disposable. These essential workers are disproportionately Black and brown. More than 5 million essential workers don't have legal documentation, and many are hardly making enough money to get by. The failure, in fact, the outright refusal of the past administration to protect essential workers during this pandemic has been truly shameful, and that's going to change. So, Mr. Costa, you represent transit workers, school bus drivers, subway workers, rail operators. The Biden administration has now committed to issuing enforceable health and safety standards for all workplaces. Can you just say a word about why that is so important for the workers that you represent?
Thank you, Senator. Thank you very much. Like I said in my statement, we pushed and pushed to get federal guidelines, and the last administration didn't get anything. Matter of fact, it was watered down. The Biden administration came in quickly. They reacted. The mask mandate for our drivers was huge. We appreciate that. Question about funding. We're going to need the funding on how to bring that in without using our members as the mass police. As I spoke about the assaults that happen, and bad enough that we have members that are being killed over a $2 fare, in the past, and I'm sure you've read about this, and I know you know about this. But now I don't need many of our members being beat up or killed over the debate or politics that they have on a bus on the face mask. So the administration's reaction was greatly appreciated. We appreciate that, but now our focus is how it's going to be applied, how we're going to enforce it, and who's going to do the enforcing. So once again, the money will be needed, I believe, for those agencies to be helpful to institute this to save lives, not only for my members, but the riding public. A bus, if a driver is infected, there's 100 people on a bus or 50 people, 100, on a bus, they can be infected also.
Right. Oh, that's very important, and thank you. Health and safety standards are powerfully important. They're just one piece of the puzzle, though. I've proposed an essential worker bill of rights outlining a full suite of rights and protections and benefits that I believe all essential workers deserve. And that includes things like hazard pay, paid leave, healthcare protection. Representative Ro Khanna and I are expanding it now to include priority access to vaccines. But we also know that unions improve workplace health and safety, and that union workers are more likely to have paid sick leave and employer-provided health insurance. Right now, only about 1 in every 8 essential workers is currently covered by a union contract. So the Essential Workers Bill of Rights also includes protecting collective bargaining agreements and the right of workers to join unions. Now, there is another piece to this as well. We need to ensure that America's workers, including those who have battled this deadly virus every day in their workplaces, are not earning poverty wages. Mr. Costa, there are some who say that now is not the right time to increase the minimum wage. I'd like to hear from you. Would raising the minimum wage help promote an equitable recovery from this crisis that workers are facing?
Once again, Senator, thank you, and thank you for supporting everything you just said as far as heroes pay and yes, it would. I mean, we've been fighting for a minimum wage. I think every time we spread money around, the economy gets better, right? So this is America, right? Why aren't we taking care of our working families? To me, yes, the 15 minimum wage would help the economy, would help the livelihoods of many families, our minorities. We supported 100%. We supported it from the beginning, and matter of fact, we supported it even if you want to give more.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, it is time to deliver for workers, and that means doing everything we can, including using budget reconciliation to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. I appreciate your being here, Mr. Costa, and thanks for having this hearing, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Warren. I see the names of Senators Crapo and Tillis and Rounds on the screen. I don't know if any one of them is here or any other Republican members, so I'll go to Senator Van Hollen of Maryland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member Toomey. And let me just start by seconding and strongly endorsing the comments just made by Senator Warren with respect to the urgency of increasing the minimum wage. It would be phased into $15 an hour over a period of time, hitting that level in 2025. And so I hope we will work to get that done. Mr. Costa, and I thank you for all that you and your workers are doing around the country, in Maryland, in Baltimore, Washington area. And I look forward to working with you and the chairman and others to make sure that we address all the important security and health concerns that you've raised. Your drivers have been right there on the front lines fighting the pandemic, and sadly, as you've testified, also having to fight, people who want to use violence to challenge the social distancing rules. I want to sort of broaden that lens a little bit because we had earlier introduced a bill to deal with transit worker safety, even apart from the challenges during the pandemic, the Transit Worker and Pedestrian Protection Act. And thank you for your input on that. I wondered if you could just talk about the need to move forward with that legislation.
Senator, long term, we support Senators Van Hollen's Transit Workers and Pedestrian Act to stop this endless assault on our operators. So we want to thank you for that. Unfortunately, it's been too long. It hasn't been passed. Not one more operator should be assaulted. You know, the industry needs to do something here with the design of a bus. We all know it. This is America. We're spending tons of money on equipment, and nobody's took the fact that every day that I wake up, an operator is assaulted around the country and in Canada. This bill, I don't understand why it's taking so long. It's a bill that keeps our operators safe, that protects my operators, it protects the riding public. And if we don't fix the buses and if the riders don't feel that it's safe, the industry is going to die. And if we don't have the industry, you're not going to build back the cities. We need this bill to keep the agencies and put them in a position that they can help protect us and help the riding public to keep the passengers coming and to bring them back.
Well, thank you, and please thank your members. As you say, nobody should have to put their life at risk to do their job in transit, helping other people get to and from work. And that was true. That's true, of course, during the pandemic, but it was true before, and that's why we look forward to working with you to pass this legislation. To Mayor Brown and Mr. Tashima, I held a forum in Maryland the other day, a Zoom forum on the issue of affordable housing, especially focused on the housing emergency we're in right now. And clearly the eviction moratoriums have helped protect people. But there was an issue that was raised that appears to be a loophole, which is that people obviously have terms to their leases. Some people are month to month. And while the eviction moratorium prohibits somebody from being evicted because their non-payment is related to hardships or loss of jobs and income because of the coronavirus, that protection is not there for people whose lease comes to an end, even though that may be the reason that it's not being extended as it normally would be as a matter of course. Can you speak to that a little bit, and whether you have any ideas of how we can address that problem, and whether it's something that you've encountered?
Senator, I'll just go and give you a sense of what's happening here in the city of Youngstown. We see the eviction issue as it goes hand in hand with the pandemic. I think I heard someone mention earlier that they couldn't see the connection. The connection for me is that individuals who are being evicted, now they've got to live with a family or friend. If they're infected, now they're taking that infection to another home. So it becomes a great spreader. The other issue is that we're not going to be in this pandemic all of our time. There's going to come a time where we're going to get on the other side of this pandemic. We need to make sure that we're prepared, that individuals need to have housing counseling. Renters need to understand their rights, but also there's got to be a better understanding of how do we figure out, now that we've come through this pandemic, because many of these workers they're unemployed. We've got to figure out how to retrain the workforce. We've got to find out to make sure they have a good workforce development program for the workforce that's going to be there. And we have to make sure that this is long-term, a sustaining plan. So the eviction is just one issue that is hard hitting many of those in our community. And from the landlord side of the world, they need to be paid as well. But we've got to get through it together. There's got to be a bridge and a gap. And I think this is why I'm so much of an advocate to make sure that we have assistance for those in rental to make sure that they're not evicted.
Well, I appreciate that. And I'm a strong proponent of the $25 billion rental assistance provision that was pushed very hard by Senator Brown and myself and others in December, and support the increase in that proposed by President Biden. And just in ending here on the issue of long-term unemployment, I'm really glad you raised that. I'm worried about it. We have 4 million long-term unemployed right now. I know that, and I can follow up later, I know that Mr. Holtz-Eakin has also been very concerned about that. And so I see my time's up, but I look forward to circling back with all of you for your thoughts. Senator Wyden and I and Senator Baldwin have put forward some proposals on that. We look forward to working with you. It's going to be a big issue as we defeat the virus, as the economy comes back. We're at risk of leaving millions behind if we don't do something more. So I will follow up. I see my time's up.
Thank you, Senator Van Hollen. As we close the hearing, thank you to the witnesses. Senator Toomey has a request, I believe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I'd just like to make a unanimous consent request to insert into the record 17 letters that I've received related to today's hearing. They come from Pennsylvania business owners and advocacy groups that are concerned about job losses resulting from a minimum wage increase, parents and community groups supporting the reopening schools, and some think tank scholars who are worried about excessive government spending.
I thank the ranking member. For those on the committee, senators, I see Senator Hagerty still on, and I assume a number of others whose pictures aren't on the screen who wish to submit questions. Those questions are due 1 week from today. Please get questions you have for any or all of the 5 witnesses to the committee staff by next Thursday. And then witnesses, we ask witnesses, you have 45 days to respond to any of those questions. And thank you again. I thank the witnesses. Thanks to me. Thanks for sharing your stories and the experience of workers and families. You certainly hear a lot of statistics about this pandemic. We too often become numb to the numbers. I thought the stories you tell about drivers and about people who are about to be evicted or small businesses really matter. Anyone who listened to real people would realize that the 2001 corporate tax cuts were not a success story. Neither were the 2017 corporate tax cuts. Ohioans know that. People around the country know that. We've tried that corporations first approach over and over, and we know it doesn't work for people in Youngstown. It doesn't work for people driving or riding buses. It doesn't work for people who get their income from a paycheck, not a stock portfolio. We're done with that. And as some of the talk we've heard today about raising the minimum wage, I want to be clear to workers listening that when politicians are saying they simply don't want you to get a raise, they don't want you to have a wage you can live on and raise a family on. I want to see more money in workers' pockets. I want to get more aid to small businesses that we heard today are struggling. We're done aiming low. I look forward to working with my colleagues to invest in the rest of the country so we can actually have a recovery that lifts all boats. So thank you all for joining us. The hearing is adjourned.